Hello folks, I'm going to be rating some of the popular Genshin Impact teams and we'll put them on a tier list based on their damage output and how fun or easy they are to play, because everybody loves tier lists. And I'm also gonna have a special bonus exploration team at the end of the video. Before Sumeru released, the team options were more limited and pretty similar. You got your popular Vape teams, Nationals, and Freeze teams. With the new Dendro element, many more team options opened up that brought a lot of underused characters back into the limelight. By the way, the teams mentioned here tend to be more the popular ones that players use. If I missed some of your favorite teams, let me know in the comments below. Now let's begin. Here are your standard tiers, with double S being broken and overpowered like Goku or Saitama, all the way down to F tier, which you should only use if you enjoy pain and suffering. We will be briefly going over lots of team types, so I'll be going over many playstyles. Those teams include Bloom, Quicken, Burgeon, Overload, Superconduct, Taser, Soup, Vaporize, Melt, Freeze, and Geo teams. Alright, starting with the new Dendro element, we have Bloom teams. I am including Nilou Bloom and Hyperbloom in the same category. Ayato's Hyperbloom includes Raiden, Kazuha, and Nahida. You can replace Kazuha with Yelan to get extra HP synergy and Hydra damage, but I prefer Kazuha to swirl and group enemies up so Ayato can slash all the enemies together. One has better AoE and the other has better single target. This is also a very easy team to play. Raiden is there mainly for her elemental skill, and you can replace her with Kuki if you want some heals. Nahida will E and Q and refresh her E every time the Dendro Links falls off, and Ayato is fairly obvious and easy to use, starting off with a very strong team in S tier. Here's another Hyperbloom team, but with an on-field Nahida instead of a Hydro. The team is Nahida, Kingcho, Yelan, and Kuki. The Hydro swords will proc non-stop when Nahida's attacks, making plenty of Dendro cores for Kuki to activate. Maximize Kuki's elemental mastery for extra damage, and EM scales really nice with her too. If you think you don't need a healer, then add in Raiden Shogun instead. Another strong and simple team, S tier again. Finally, a proper Bloom team with Nilou. Without her, the normal Bloom teams are too annoying to play because they take forever to explode, and for some reason, Nilou in Hyper Bloom teams is actually better than some Bloom teams, but regardless, this team will let her shine as a secondary DPS since she won't really be the on-screen. Which kinda sucks cause I love her animations and everything. Anyway, this team includes Nilou to make the special Bloom Seeds, Kokomi, who is the actual on-screen DPS, Nahida, and Dendro MC. Dendro MC won't have their burst up all the time, so rotate between them and Nahida to keep the Dendros on the enemies non-stop. Kokomi's normal attacks will constantly make Bloom Seeds, and you kinda need a strong healer so the seeds don't end up killing your own team. And Kokomi fills both those roles. A tier, because those Bloom Seeds don't care about friendly fire. Quicken and Aggravate time. Kaching's time to shine after being neglected for so long. Add in Nahida, Kazuha, and Fischl, and you got one of the best Aggravate teams. Fischl, while Oz is up, does a ton of damage and electro hits, and Kaching does an even crazier number of electro hits while on field. Just summon Oz, swirl with Kazuha, then have Nahida and Kaching do their thing. Raiden can replace Fischl for more consistent electro hits and extra energy, but Fischl will do more damage. A tier. And for Quicken, let's add in the new hubby Alhaitham, Nahida as the second Dendro, Fischl or Raiden as Electro depending on what you need, and Kazuha to swirl and group up enemies. If you want a healer to keep Alhaitham from dying, then replace Nahida with Yao Yao or Kazuha with Zhongli. One of Alhaitham's biggest problems is how easy he gets interrupted, which is solved by Zhongli's shield. And if Fischl isn't getting enough Electro, then use Raiden instead. This only goes to A tier because Alhaitham can be a little harder to use. Next up, Burgeon. Nahida, Yelan, Kaching, and Kokomi will provide the sustain and plenty of Hydro for Nahida to create seeds. Now comes the Pyro unit to proc the seeds. Toma is the best one for this role, and we can see him shine as well. His slower off-field Pyro procs and shield is perfect for this team. A tier. I also want to hope that Daya will be a good Pyro for Burgeon teams, since most of the Sumeru characters help enable new and unique Dendro teams, like how Nilou made Bloom teams viable. And Dea's visual design looks great too, I just hope she plays well. As for all other Burgeon team compositions, they belong in F tier. Burgeon is still very annoying to manage, and you need to balance keeping your team alive as well as keep proccing the seeds. Nope, Burgeon teams are not for me. Now back to some of the original underused reactions. Overload is mediocre since the reaction isn't that strong and can knock enemies away, like how Saitama knocks everyone away with Justice Punch, making you waste time chasing after them. One of the better Overload teams is Yoimiya, Raiden, Venti, and Bennett. If you are fighting larger enemies, you can replace Venti with Zhongli to prevent Yoimiya from getting interrupted. Her damage gets pretty bad if she can't do her full normal attack chain. You can also sub in Yanfei instead of Yoimiya, but how can you say no to her smile? C tier because it's Overload. Superconduct. There are not many strong Superconduct teams nowadays since they lack all the bonus damage from constant elemental reactions. Eula is still the queen of physical damage, and one of her best teams includes Raiden to help Eula get her burst back faster, Rosaria for crit synergy, and Zhongli to make sure Eula gets her full combo off without getting interrupted. He also adds extra damage with Tenacity of the Millilith. The hardest part about this team is choosing Eula's optimal combo during her burst, which I cover in depth with my Eula guide. The general combo is starting with Zhongli's shield, then Raiden's skill, then Rosaria's burst. Then swap to Eula and tap her elemental skill, then burst. Use 4 normal attacks, then hold her elemental skill, then quickly do another 4 normal attacks and hope you get as many hits as you can before her burst blows up for big damage. A tier. Taser or Electro-Charged teams tend to be cheap to build and very easy to play. You got your 4-star variants like Sucrose, Fisho, Beidou, and Xingqiu. Very easy to use. Set up the Hydro and Electro abilities, then swap to Sucrose and let her keep using her normal attack to trigger non-stop lightning. An easy S tier just by having some common characters. Another fun variation consists of Child, Raiden, Beidou, and Kazuha. Child will be causing a bunch of numbers to show up, and you can use Raiden's burst while his E is coming off cooldown. Just make sure to use Beidou's burst with Child and not Raiden. B tier since the Raiden-Beidou synergy doesn't work. Time for a more recently coined Soup Team. Was the person hungry when making up with these names? I don't know. But Soup Team is pretty much any team with 3 or 4 different elements. I'm sure you heard of the National or Rational teams before. Well, those are Soup Teams. And speaking of those, let's talk about that first. The original National team is Xiangling, Bennett, Xingqiu, and Chongyun. A very free-to-play friendly team that is easy to use and can handle any content in the game. I will put this original fan favorite in S tier. Nowadays, people replace Chongyun with Sucrose for better AoE and elemental damage. This variant is my favorite national team since Sucrose can keep enemies close for Xiangling's AoE and it gives our shy little alchemist more time to shine. Another S tier. Another variation is the Raiden National Team, or Rational for short. This replaces Sucrose with Raiden Shogun and performs extremely well thanks to Raiden's constant off-field damage and battery for the rest of the team. A lot of Xiangling and Xingqiu's damage comes from their burst, and Raiden lets you burst more often with her energy and increases their burst damage as well. Double S tier. The last Soup team I want to mention is named Sukokomon, or the Gotta Catch 'em All team, which includes Sucrose, Kokomi, Xiangling, and Fisho. This team summons 3 pocket monsters, Teddiursa, Honchkrow, and Tentacool. Send out everyone's summons and swirl with Sucrose. It's very easy to play. I put this on B tier because it can be annoying when all your Pokemons are on cooldown and tired. Vaporize is another classic team comp and is one of the strongest reactions due to how easy it is to pull off. The classic Vaporize team consists of a Pyro main DPS with Hydro off-fields. One of these teams with the highest DPS ceiling is Wu Tao, Xingqiu, Zhongli, and Albedo. Xingqiu and Yelan are the only 2 Hydro units able to keep up with Wu Tao's Pyro, and since her charge attack has no internal cooldown, every hit will cause Vaporize. Zhongli provides a nice thick shield for Wu Tao to perform under 50% health, and Albedo adds personal off-field damage, Geo Resonance for another 15% damage, and another 125 EM for even more damage. The shield and swords is enough to keep Wu Tao alive while she can self-heal with her burst. An easy double S tier for this team. My personal team on my main account that I've been using over a year now is a Yoimiya Vaporize team. This team has the best girl, Xingqiu, Zhongli, and Bennett. No Anemo here since Yoimiya needs a shield to get her backloaded normal attacks out. I will lose too much damage by dodging attacks and resetting her normal attack chain every time. I will be putting this team in high A tier, but I always know it's triple S in my heart. There are also some Vaporize teams that utilize Hydro proccing, which benefits from the 2x damage multiplier, but most of those teams are very annoying to use due to their tight timing and rotation to make all the elements in the correct order. I don't want to talk about those Vaporize teams, but here's another one that has a Hydro main DPS. Many know this as the International team, which includes Child, Xiangling, Kazuha, and Bennett. We already know how well Xiangling and Kazuha works together. Now add in the fast pyro of Xiangling's burst with an even faster hydro from Child's water swords. This team is also very easy to use. The biggest concern is to not stay in Child's sword form for too long, otherwise you'll be waiting forever to get his cooldown back. A good signal to change stance is when Pyronado is over, which has a very obvious visual cue. This team is also fun to play since enemies get vacuumed towards you and you see a bunch of numbers pop up everywhere. Double S tier. Traditional Melt teams are pretty mediocre because there's no off-field pyro unit that can keep up with the cryo main DPS waifus like Ganyu or Ayaka. There just isn't enough pyro application. Until now, what changed was not a new pyro support, but the new Dendro element to apply burning on enemies. We have a very strong Melt team that consists of Ayaka or Ganyu, whichever you prefer, #WaifuWars. The rest of the team includes Nahida, Kazuha, and Bennett. For this rotation, start with Bennett's burst, but try not to hit the enemies with it because you do not want to apply pyro on the enemy. You want the cryo instead. So after using Bennett's burst, swap to Ganyu or Ayaka, use her E, then swirl that cryo with Kazuha for some big buffs. Now swap to Nahida, use her E and Q, and finally swap back to your cryo main and use Ganyu's Charge Shot or Ayaka's burst to melt away the enemy. Even though Nahida's Q does not benefit from cryo or Anemo party members, her Ascension 1 does increase their EM by a lot, which is really good for melt damage. If done correctly, the enemy will be lit on fire with burning and you'll literally melt away their health. Double S tier for this team. Sadly, non-Nahida Melt teams are still lackluster, and most of them will be B tier or lower. That ranking is due to a mix of difficulty to get the correct melt reactions and the overall damage output of those teams. Next up, freeze teams. These teams are one of the strongest against enemies that can be frozen, but becomes a little weaker against bosses. The most iconic of these teams is the original Morgana, which consists of Mona, Ganyu, Diona, and Venti to swirl and crowd control enemies. This team does not need a healer against non-bosses because frozen enemies cannot do damage. Now with the introduction of more characters, the Morgana team got several variations such as using Ayaka, Shenhe, or Kokumi into the mix. Kokumi does less damage than Mona, but does provide some heals when fighting bosses. Shenhe will add more damage than Diona, and Diona's shield is replaced by Kokumi's even stronger heals. Regardless of the variation, any of these Morgana freeze teams are an easy S tier. Finally, Geo teams. Geo is a weird element. Geo reactions do not do extra damage directly. Instead, they give your team shields, and other abilities and gear give you bonuses while shielded. There are two Geo teams that come in mind. One is the pure Geo team with Ito, Zhongli, Albedo, and Goro. Goro is stronger with more Geo units. Albedo provides decent off-field damage, and Zhongli just makes your team tanky and unkillable. The downside of this team is the lack of reactions. You won't get to crystallize enemies that often, but it's not really needed since Ito can dish out a bunch of damage with his burst. Overall, I place this team in A tier since it feels kind of boring to play without the reactions. And the bonus team I want to talk about is an exploration team. Since you need to travel around a lot in Genshin the first time around, these teams will help you zoom from point A to point B much faster. My favorite exploration team is Yelan for her elemental skill, and also lets you restore stamina while she's doing her elemental sprint. Kazuha for his leaps and 20% stamina saving, Rosaria for faster move speed at night, and Wanderer for some floating and Anemo resonance. This team is decent in combat against random enemies as well, and is one of the fastest traversal teams to explore and collect materials, putting this banger team at the top in double S. If you want a cheaper exploration team that don't use so many 5 stars, then Rosaria with any 2 Anemo characters is enough. You can add in Sayu for her Sonic role, and the Tanuki is also just adorable, but she can slow you down when she exits her role. And that's my tier list for some of the popular and common teams in Genshin, and each team can have niche and specific things they do better than others. Anyways, did I mention some of your favorite teams? I know I'm missing a good handful, and even though some teams are in B tier, it doesn't mean they're bad. B does not stand for bad. I just want to have more of a spread in the ranking for the popular teams. If you got an interesting team you want me to try, let me know in the comments. And if you are still here, please like and subscribe. Maybe I'll get to that 100k sub one day. Ta-ta for now, have fun out there, traveler.